today's video, I want to discuss the 4 new Looper provider types made available in our last release cycle. These new provider types are part of our ongoing effort to continue to provide you all with different ways to access information in your WordPress installation and then output it on the front end of your site in creative and exciting new ways. I've actually got a fun little page I put together here which demonstrates a few of the different concepts and provider types that just came out. And yes, this design will be available on Design Cloud. But before we jump into that, I actually want to switch over to another page here, and we're going to start with our first of the new provider types here, which is our all terms Looper provider. Now, the all terms Looper provider is pretty straightforward. It operates a lot like the current post terms Looper provider, which you've seen in some previous videos. The primary difference with this provider type is that it will access all of the terms available to a specific taxonomy across your entire site, irregardless of what post or page or post type you're working with at that time. Now, over here in the live preview, you're actually seeing 3 different styles of terms here, which actually came out in this release cycle as well. These are our new terms elements, and each of them is powered using the all terms provider, and it will be pulling in categories by default because even if you haven't assigned anything yet in your WordPress installation, there's always at least that uncategorized category in WordPress. And really, these are just showing off some creative ways that we can take this content and style it and use it on our website. So we've got our cloud style here, which is a little bit more of a throwback to a classic kind of tag cloud design, but you could also use this as a more modern kind of category navigation. We're also doing some kind of fun stuff in this design as well, such as including the count for how many items are assigned to that category. So to see how that works, we can just jump in here to our term, which is a button, and you can see that we're pulling through the term URL. And then if I jump down to my text setup, we've just got our term name being pulled through, and then our term count. And all of this is available again here in our little dynamic content pop-up. If we just search for term, you'll see a whole list here of options that we can access using that dynamic content pop-up. And another really cool feature about the all terms Looper provider is that we can exclude any terms that are not currently assigned yet. So for example, you can see that I've got my Greek revival category and my Victorian category, and nothing is using that yet. And there might be situations, again, depending on how you're using this as navigation or something else like that, where you don't want to have it linking off to something that is empty currently. So we can exclude those empty terms, and you'll see them just completely go away from the list there. If we go down the page a little bit more, you'll just see a couple more variations on this same theme. This is our minimal term style, which works great as kind of a footnote to a page or post, just kind of linking out to your other terms there. Just a simple, clean, kind of classic design. And then finally, we have our column style here, which is designed to be used in more of a single column type setup where the list is going down vertically. And you can see we've done some fun stuff here showing off the count for each of our terms here as well. All right, so next, let's jump back to our design from earlier and start taking this apart one piece at a time, because there's a lot of really fun new things we can do with these last 3 Looper provider types. As I mentioned earlier, I've just got a little page that I threw together here, just kind of imagining maybe a design for a gym where they're offering some classes, perhaps showing off some testimonials, and then at the end, having a call to action for some pricing and signing up for all of these things. So let's take these sections one at a time here. For my first section here, you'll see that we've got this classes setup, and this particular looper is powered by, if I inspect this and go over here, our current page children looper provider. This one is very straightforward. It's a lot like our recent post looper provider. There's really not much for you to do other than make sure that your pages in the back end are assigned appropriately so they can get pulled through here. So I'm currently on a page in my install called classes, and beneath that classes page, I have these 7 child pages, which are assigned as direct children underneath that class page. So if you have a situation like that where you've got a parent-child page relationship and you want to link to those child pages from the parent page, sort of as like a simplified navigation, this is the Looper provider for you. Turning this on will give you automatic access to each of those child pages and all of the stuff that comes along with them. So these are all of my featured images, for example, that are assigned to each of those pages. So I'm just pulling those through here for my little linked cells here. You can see that each of these items are linked using our A tag on this grid cell, and I'm just accessing the post permalink using dynamic content. And then for the content in each of these, if I inspect this title, you'll see that we've got a headline, which is just pulling through the title. And then for this little subheadline here, all I'm really doing with that was I set up a quick little meta field using ACF Pro. And it was just sort of a necessity for this design to have something that showed off a fake class time for each of these pretend classes that we're working on here. So just a fun little example of how you can get a little bit of extra mileage out of those pages. And then of course, clicking on any one of these cells would take you off to that page, which you could then design in Pro's Layout Builder if you're using Pro, for example. So lots of fun possibilities there. Another fun thing I did here to take this just a little bit further, especially since this will be on Design Cloud and you most likely will not have a page called Classes in your install with these direct children on it. I've got some conditional content going on here. So on my first cell here, if I inspect it and then go up to Customize and click on Conditions, you'll see we've got this provider output is not empty. So this is basically saying, is that current page children Looper provider returning any items or not? And if there are items, they will be output using this style. However, if I go to my preview manager here and ignore element conditions, you'll see this no results cell, which will show up if there aren't any child pages assigned to the page that you're using this with. This also works really great for just situations if you were using this on a live site where maybe you have turned those pages off for a time and they're not public anymore. This allows your pages to be fully dynamic and respond to the content in the back end of your site without you needing to go make any tweaks every time you change that, or even worse, have some broken markup on the front end of your website. So just a really cool thing there, being able to leverage those element conditions to get this dynamic markup doing all the work for us so that we're not having to manage all of these tiny little details on our site. And of course, the condition for this particular cell, if I inspect it, go to Customize and see this is just the inverse of our previous one. We're saying, is the Looper provider, which in this case is our current page children, is that empty? If so, output this cell here in our markup. All right, so let me jump back down to my preview manager, turn our element conditions back on. And now let's jump down to this Testimonials section. This section is using our custom Looper provider, and it looks pretty straightforward at first glance, but once you see what's going on under the hood, I think it will start to help you all realize a lot of really fun things you can start to explore in your designs with this Looper provider. So for this particular section, I've got my provider on this column. I'm going to inspect that, go up to Customize, and you'll see that we've got it set to our custom Looper provider. Now the really cool thing about this setup is we can access information from our child theme using this hook parameter, which I'll show you how that works in just one moment. Now one way you can approach this is to add a hook in your child theme which maybe just has some static data that you don't want anyone messing with and you want to access on the front end of your website. So if I hop over to my child theme for a second here, you'll see I've got my hook here called Gimme One, and just ignore this code for a second, but you could basically just return an array of information that you can access. And again, perhaps you want to kind of protect it here from any other users on your site so that it doesn't get overwritten or adjusted. And I think that's all really fun, but where the real power of this particular provider comes in is using it like I've got set up here, where I'm using these hooks as more of a way to process information and then return it in a specific way. So what I'm doing here, I've got my hook called gimme1, and this is our syntax here for setting up your own hook. You'll need to prefix it with CS looper custom, all separated by underscores, and then whatever comes after that is what you will then name it here in the hook section. So I'm just referencing that gimme1 from the end of my function over here. Next, what I've done is in the params control here, I've set up a little JSON array where I've got 3 objects of 3 different faux testimonials for this gym that I'm working on here. But you'll see that we're only returning one of these items. So what's happening over here on the hook side is that I'm accessing my params, which again is right in here. And all of this is documented in much more detail on our website. So definitely check that out to kind of see how things really work under the hood. But I'm basically accessing that JSON data from params. I'm just using a PHP shuffle function. So I'm getting a random order each time this gets loaded. And then I'm just returning the first item in that reshuffled index. So how this ultimately works on the front end of the website, if I open that up and go down to my section, you'll see that every time I refresh this page, I have the potential to get a new testimonial and just keep it fresh each time a user comes to this page. Now, as I keep refreshing it, sometimes I might get a double here or there, but the really fun thing about this is that every time a new user comes to this page, that section will dynamically populate a new testimonial from that list. So of course, if we wanted to, we could come back to our data here and we could add 20 more if we wanted and just have a much larger sample to pull from and just get that one random testimonial each time. But we've just got a real stripped down simple version here to kind of see what's going on. Now again, the really cool thing about this provider is that our gimme1 hook here that we're using to just shuffle our data and return a random item is we can assign any bit of data to that hook. So if I wanted to use this pattern somewhere else on my site, say I've got a selection of products and I want to feature just one randomly each time the page loads, I can access that data, pass it into my gimme1 hook, and I'm using the same functionality to shuffle that data, return the first random one, and then output something different on every page reload. So that, I think, is where the real power of these custom looper providers comes in. Being able to set up custom hooks on the back end that can process your data in unique ways and then allow you to play around with that output and get something much more dynamic instead of just showing the same piece of information every time a page loads. So that is it for our custom looper provider. And then finally, this one is actually a little bit of a hodgepodge of a couple things, but the main one I want to show off here is our new array looper provider, which I'm using here for this list in my pricing table. Now, one thing you might be noticing here, because of how our loopers work and how they display the virtualized elements as these kind of grayed out items, you might notice that we've got 2 loopers going on here. I've got this whole secondary column here, which appears to be a looped item. And then I've also got my list within each of these pricing columns, which also appears to have a looper working on it. And that's exactly what's going on here. This array looper provider allows us to create these deeply nested trees where we can access a list of data within another list of data, if you will. And it sounds a little complicated, but it's really pretty straightforward once you start working with it. And I'm going to show you here in a second that if you get your design and your data structure set up just right, it makes managing your content so much easier. And that's the real benefit of using these types of setups in your designs. So let's start from the top here. I'm going to inspect my row and go to customize, and you'll see that I've got a JSON provider turned on here. This is where I've set up the main data for this entire section that we're working on. So if I click into my content, you'll see again, we've got our array of 2 objects here. And each of these objects represents one of my pricing columns over here. If I move this over just a little bit, you can see where some of this data is syncing up. So for example, I've got this level key here, which is being output right here. And you'll notice for my second column, which has this ongoing level, that's coming from here. Additionally, we could just go down these one by one. You'll see we've got the price, $99, one time. Same thing over here, we've got 21 and monthly. So you're kind of seeing how each of these keys is corresponding to a pricing column over here in the live preview. But a pretty common scenario for a pricing column setup like this is to maybe have a list of features for each available level so that you can quickly give people a bird's eye view of what they're getting for that particular level that they might be buying into. Well, this is where our array provider type comes in. Now, again, remember that we're still on our top level row here, but you can see in that data tree, we've got this key of list, which is just an array of different strings. So you can see right here, I'm on my bundle level right here. And if I go down to my list, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, and those 5 items are outputting here in my list inside that pricing column. So how exactly do we access that data from this top level row in this nested element? Well, it starts here on what you're seeing as this list element in the markup. I'm going to inspect that, go up to customize, and you'll see that its looper provider is set to an array, which just means that we're going to reference an array in a parent list that's already being given somewhere up the tree. And then all we have to do after that is specify the key that we're looking for in that parent set of data to access that array. So again, if I quickly hop over to my row, customize, open up its data, you can see that the key we're looking for is called list. Click back over here to my list item. We've got our array with its key set to list. Now, once we've set up that provider on our list parent, we then need to consume it. So I'm going to go to my list item here, and we're just consuming all of the items in that list. And then the way that we access the information in that particular item, you can see I've got my headline here, and I open it up, and we just use our dynamic content tag of item. And again, you can get there by going to the looper section in your dynamic content pop-up and just click on current item, which will give you this string right here. So why go through all of this trouble to set up a big data structure on your top level element and have these nested loopers and consumers and just everything going on? It might feel like a lot of work for a simple pricing table, right? Well, what's great about this is that for this type of design, what you're probably going for most is consistency. And the great thing with loopers is they will take that model given by the first item in the looper and then repeat that throughout. So you can see with our design here, we have a very consistent setup. Our price is aligned just right, our text, everything is output in a very formatted and uniform way. And anytime I want to go in and make an adjustment to something, it's very easy to, for example, click on this price, and maybe I want to adjust the size. So I don't like it as big as it currently is. I can move it down to 4 ems, and you'll see that everything throughout the tree gets updated accordingly. Additionally, it's very easy to make content changes to everything that we're working on. For example, I can click on my row here, jump up to customize, find my data, and let's say for this bundle category, I just want to add a new item to my list here. Well, I've already styled it. I've already got the look I want. I don't want to have to copy that element and reposition it and then go find the text. With this particular setup, we've abstracted all of that away. So if we want a new item, it's as simple as copying one of our current items, adding a new one, and then just updating some text in there for us to see that new item being output on our list. And finally, and this is where things get really fun in my opinion, if you've really done your due diligence in setting up the design in a way where it is responsive and responds to its content well, you can do things like add a whole nother pricing level very easily. So you can see here that I've got my 2 pricing columns. Well, I've set up just a little bit of data here for a 3rd level. So I can come back to my list here and find my 1st column, 2nd column, and let's just say I want to add this 3rd column to my list of options that's available. If I paste this in and then go down over here to the live preview, you can see that we've got our 3rd column. And as long as my data is lining up with how I've set up that looper, and as long as my design is responding well to how that new content gets added, We've now added a new column to our design in about 1 second. Another fun thing you can do with this particular setup is have variable markup. So we can use our element conditions to check for the existence of a particular set of data, and if it's not there, then we won't output anything. So for example, I've designed this little featured badge here that I want to put on my pricing column that is our most popular option for our users. But you can see that I don't have that on my bundle or my premium level that we added here. Well, how that's working is if I go back to my data, you'll see that we've got this featured key. And remember, all of these keys can be set up exactly how you want. That's just how I've labeled it for this example. So I've got my featured key, and for the bundle column, you'll see that it is an empty string. However, for my ongoing column, it's set to most popular. And then of course, on our premium column, it's empty as well. So the way that's working is if I go over here, and if I find my featured badge and inspect it, I'll jump up here to Customize and Conditions, and you can see that we're looking for our looper field. Key is featured. Again, that's what I labeled it earlier in my data. And then this is a little trick that I actually covered in a recent element condition expressions video. I said, if you are evaluating a string and you say, if that string is not empty, output that item, you can do variable markup like this. So as long as that featured key is left empty, nothing will be output in that badge, and you won't get that markup at all on the front end of your site. So again, we're leveraging all of this logic, these conditions, these structures to really just make our job so much easier in the long run whenever we want to make changes down the road. So let's say that I want to add a badge to my bundle column. It's as simple as inspecting that data, going and finding its featured input here, and then just typing in a value. So now that I've typed that in, you can see that we've got our so simple text over there. And of course, if we wanted to remove it, it's as easy as deleting that string and then having the badge go away from your markup.